From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gerd. We begin in Venezuela, where a group of migrants have returned home under what the government calls the Homeland Return Plan. 89 people who had fled to Peru asked to be brought back. They say things weren't necessarily better abroad and could even have been harsher at times. Venezuela's foreign ministry says that the government helped them to return.
Flight 6051 is ready to take off.
We're about to take off towards Lima, Peru, for the Homeland Return mission.
We have left Venezuela to bring back the men, women and children who will occupy the seats inside this plane as they return home. This is a very special flight for the state-owned airline Conviasa. As the flight made its way to Peru, the Venezuelan embassy in Lima was receiving the citizens that signed on for the Homeland Return Plan.
Some Venezuelans are sleeping on the streets. They get job offers, but it's a lie.
Time went by as quickly as their desire to return home. They are now living in a country they thought would give them the same treatment as Venezuela does to migrants.
The truth is, we came looking for a better life and we didn't find it, so we'd rather go back home. Simple as that.
As they arrive to Lima's airport, they are one step closer to home. Peru, one of the many countries who talk about a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, has not been treating Venezuelans humanely. On the contrary, migrants are being mistreated. Some of them have been victims of human trafficking, such is the case of Auris, a pregnant woman who was brutally exploited.
I didn't have any access to healthcare. I didn't know how my baby was doing. I was working about 20 hours every day. I started having fights with the restaurant owner over his treatment.
They are economic migrants, victims of the economic war against Venezuela.
I cannot even explain how excited I am. I can leave behind all the suffering I experienced in Peru.
Finally, it was time to take off.
The important thing is that everybody hears the truth. People need to know what the reality is and how things work. I wish you a happy return to your homeland.
The 3 months I have spent in Peru have been the worst of my life. I left everything in Venezuela so I could start from scratch. I came looking for a better future for my children, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm going back, willing to work and to fight for our country.
Dreams, hopes and expectations fill the cabin. They return to Venezuela having learned many things.
There is a lot of poverty here. You come thinking it is very different, but is not. For instance, labor law is not enforced. You can be made to work for 12 hours a day non-stop while being paid very little. So what's the benefit here in Venezuela? That kind of treatment is outlawed because it is slavery. I prefer to return home than to live as a slave. If I need to fight for my future, I'd rather do it at home.
Some experts warn migration is being used as a political weapon, a tool in the onset of propaganda by the mainstream media and social networks that push people to make wrong choices.
I made a bad decision because of the economic war, because of this ongoing narrative saying there is no future in Venezuela. And so, when you listen to this in and day out, you make the wrong decision and leave your country without any consideration for what awaits.
A fresh start waits for them. The new economic recovery provides new possibilities for all of those who decided to leave the country. Finally, they are back home.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez will arrive to Bolivia on Thursday. The train project connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans will be a priority during his meeting with President Evo Morales. The leaders will also discuss other bilateral agreements. Sánchez is the first Spanish Prime Minister to visit Bolivia in over 20 years. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, has the details.
Spanish
Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is expected to sign 3 agreements with President Evo Morales. One of them focuses on the Spanish cooperation for the upcoming 4 years, the second one on cooperation in justice, and the third and most expected one related to the participation of Spanish companies in the construction of the Bi-oceanic train that will connect the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. This project, with an estimated investment of $14 billion, will connect the Brazilian port of Santos in the Atlantic Ocean with the Peruvian port of Ilo in the Pacific, in a route of over 3,700 kilometers. Just like the other European countries, Spain will not only participate in the construction, but also in the funding of the project. Hours before Sanchez's arrival, President Evo Morales welcomed him and highlighted this project as well as other bilateral issues. Morales also highlighted Sanchez as the first Spanish Prime Minister visiting the country while in cabinet in over 20 years. Sanchez's visit will take place in the city of Santa Cruz, 900 kilometers off capital La Paz, and it will last 1 day, since this Tuesday evening until tomorrow evening.
Sanchez arrives in Bolivia on Tuesday, but previously he visited Chile, where he met with President Sebastián Piñera. They discussed mainly issues surrounding education, especially a way to ease the recognition of university degrees. Sanchez has vowed to reinforce cooperation between Spain and Latin American nations. The Spanish Prime Minister will also visit Colombia and Costa Rica. And Sanchez has called for dialogue to overcome the crisis in Venezuela. The Spanish Prime Minister has said that the international community has to support talks, but rejected any attempt or conversation on foreign intervention.
As a country, we feel indebted to Venezuela. And of course, this is not a crisis that is alien to us. It is a crisis that has been alarming for a long time. And that, of course, we look at with deep concern.
The United States and Mexico were able to negotiate an introductory NAFTA agreement. Leaders of both countries described the talks as intense.
The latest chapter in the negotiations of the North American Free Trade Agreement has come to a close. Canada was left out of the talks. According to the officials present, representatives from Mexico's incoming government were in attendance.
I am convinced that we collaborate with various economic sectors and industries. This will aid development.
The incoming government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador will come to power in less than 4 months, so its representatives joined the talks. The new foreign minister explained just how much there is to discuss.
Especially in the Mexican energy sector, the labor and wage conditions of our workers, and the maintenance of space for conflict solving.
In a press conference, Donald Trump assured that the end is near for the North American Free Trade Agreement. He said he would change its name because it brings back bad memories to the American people.
Where both with Canada and with Mexico, I will terminate the existing deal. When that happens, I can't quite tell you. It depends on what the timetable is with Congress.
Unlike Trump, President-elect of Mexico insisted that the negotiations should include Canada.
It matters that Canada is involved for the North American Free Trade Agreement to sustain it.
The general consensus is that representatives of all 3 countries should meet to negotiate a new agreement.
Supporters of the anti-corruption referendum in Colombia are challenging Sunday's results. The former Senator Claudia Lopez says the National Civil Registry failed to report on the total number of votes and ballots. According to Lopez, this violates the law, and for that, the results will have to be annulled. People voted yes in all 7 questions, but the referendum failed to meet the minimum number of votes for it to be considered valid. Colombia has confirmed it will withdraw from the Union of South American Nations within 6 months. President Iván Duque made the announcement. Colombia is the latest in a series of withdrawals from UNASUR. 5 other countries have already suspended their membership. President Duque slammed the organization as a tool of the Venezuelan dictatorship. UNASUR was created a decade ago by the late Venezuelan leader Hugo Chávez, who wanted to challenge U.S. influence in the region.
Today, with precise instructions, our foreign minister sent UNASUR a letter where we denounce the constituent treaty of that entity and specify that in 6 months, our withdrawal from this organization will be effective.
We're going to take a short break now, but we'll have more news in a minute.
pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on FtS.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on FtS.
Welcome back. Teachers in Argentina are demanding better salaries and a higher budget. In Buenos Aires, teachers are holding a 3-day strike that began on Monday. A massive protest is planned for this coming Thursday. They are rejecting the low salaries in a country with rampant inflation. For a 4th year in a row, families and human rights organizations in Argentina are denouncing police brutality. Violence is reported to have risen to an alarming level.
Mothers holding pictures of their loved ones who are victims of trigger happy lead the march. In these cases, the police executed their children.
We are here for our children, but mainly for the ones who are alive, because we don't want another mother to suffer the pain that we have. Enough of the trigger happy.
The families of the victims are alarmed at the rate of killings by the security forces. Most of the people killed are under the age of 25.
I started to see the pictures of the boys who were killed by the trigger happy. They are all underage. The truth is that this looks like a cemetery. It is terrible what the police is doing.
We don't have him anymore. We have to have justice fast. There's a lot of cases and we're fighting for justice. We are fighting for justice so that what happened to us will not happen again.
Families of the victims are determined to get justice for their children. That's why they're out on the streets again, for the 4th time. They hold the state responsible.
We are not going to be quiet. We are the voices of our children. Today we are all together to say stop, enough of this minister and this corrupt government. There is no death penalty. In the midst of democracy, they disappeared our children.
The march started at the National Congress. Human rights organizations have condemned the state repression. They say it occurs daily.
The military has repressed an indigenous community in Brazil as they try to regain control of their land. A helicopter attacked the Guarani Kawa people. During the operation, 2 indigenous persons were disappeared. Members of the community have denounced the army's presence in their sacred territory. Agro-industries want to take over the Santa Maria land, an area that is recognized as indigenous property. Labor union leader Marjorie Oropeza Nunez has been murdered in Mexico. She was shot in front of her co-workers during a meeting after receiving death threats several days ago. She was known for providing support to people with limited resources and doing social work for unionized workers. And 6 dead bodies have been found in a clandestine grave in the Mexican city of Guadalajara. Between June and August, 53 bodies have been found in 9 different parts in the state of Jalisco. Authorities say violence has increased after the fracture of the new generation cartel. Social movements have informed officials there's a mass grave that could contain more than 500 bodies. And staying Staying in Mexico, authorities have rescued at least 22 migrants in the southern state of Chiapas. They were kidnapped by human traffickers on the promise of helping them to reach the United States. Our Pablo Perez has more from Mexico City.
Mexican authorities of the state of Chiapas have informed of the finding of 22 migrants that were lost, and well, now they know that they were kidnapped by the people that promised them to lead them through the Mexican territory all the way over to the northern border, the border with the United States. It seems that these people, these human traffickers, or coyotes as they are usually known, well, they took them, put them in a van, and then rode away to an undisclosed point where they were held captive with the intention of charging a ransom for their freedom to their families in Central America. It seems that most of them are from Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala, but there's at least one of the migrants coming all the way from Ecuador. And well, they were found because one of them, the 23rd one, got away while their captors were distracted, and then got to the Mexican authorities, leading them to the place they were being held captive. This is a very, very common situation in the Mexican-Guatemalan border, and let's remember that every year around 500,000 Central and South American migrants come through the southern border of Mexico, most of them with the intention of going all the way to the border with the United States.
Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada has met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to discuss the national dialogue in Nicaragua. Guterres said the dialogue must be fully inclusive. He offered the full support of the United Nations for the process, and he added that the rights of people in Nicaragua must continue to be respected. The political crisis in Nicaragua has left at least 265 people dead since mid-April, according to the Commission for Truth, Peace and Justice. 94% of Peruvians polled want the public prosecutor Pedro Sánchez to resign after a string of corruption allegations. We have more in this report.
Another day and another new corruption accusation against public prosecutor Pedro Sánchez. The latest is that he plagiarized 70% of his university thesis. In addition, it is said that his marks were manipulated so he could be appointed as public prosecutor.
He was appointed through a special process that's just unusual. He was appointed by a corrupt body in a process that's unfair.
According to the Legal Defense Institute, Chávarri is in position as public prosecutor makes corruption possible. That's because he is himself part of a mob network in the judiciary, as the audio scandal proved.
His talks with Inostroza Pariachi, one of the main actors in this network, not only show a close and friendly relationship, but also the way they behave, exchanging favors and creating a good environment for their own businesses.
But in spite of all of these accusations, the Peruvian Congress still has to begin a process against him. According to some analysts, the reason for this is his closeness with the Popular Force Party and allies.
The Popular Force has still a lot to clarify. Obviously, they want a prosecutor that favors them in corruption cases.
Odebrecht's alleged undue funding is a massive scandal, and it has to be clarified.
Just like 94% of the population, Peru's president, Martín Vizcarra, does not back Chávarri. Those numbers are from a public poll by Ipsos.
He should be fired. Why? Because of corruption. There is so much corruption, so much fraud in Peru.
He is a corrupt, and he cannot be a role model, and so everyone in the prosecutor's office should be replaced.
Hanging over Chávarri are cases of money laundering and other corruption offenses linked to the former president, congressmen and judges, cases that Peruvians fear could lead to impunity.
Hundreds of taxi drivers in Guatemala are furious about Uber. They're demanding better regulation. Drivers blocked roads in Guatemala City to protest against the ride-sharing app, which they accuse of unfair competition. They want Uber drivers to comply with the same legal requirements they are subject to, like being registered as taxis. The U.S. embargo against Cuba has cost the Caribbean island roughly $135 billion US dollars. That's according to a recent report. So let's get more on that now.
Here, in the streets of Cuba, the mere mention of the North American blockade is enough to provoke anger about the embargo and its impact. Cubans are demanding its end.
We have trouble in medicine. We have trouble in sports. The blockade echoes everywhere. The blockade affects the Cuban people in many ways, but we will come through because we have the strong will to get ahead with our own efforts.
Porque tenemos espíritu no de triunfalista, porque no somos triunfalistas, pero vamos a salir adelante.
Washington has also issued a travel alert advising U.S. citizens to reconsider flying to Cuba. That, however, has not stopped these tourists from visiting Havana.
I love the opportunity to be able to come. It's been on a bucket list of mine for years, and I just relish this opportunity to be here.
I feel safe. I feel fine. The people are very nice.
Very safe, very fun, lots of culture. I would come back again.
The U.S. State Department has even attempted to reduce their diplomats' stay in Cuba to just 1 year. International analyst Santiago Perez views all these moves as strategies to maintain the blockade.
Former Deputy Secretary of State Jordan Knight just published an article that says that his administration lies about 6 to 7 times a day, and I think that his so-called sonic attacks is an elaborated lie that seeks to dismantle the links that have been forged with the Obama administration.
According to a recent report from the Cuban Foreign Ministry, the U.S. blockade has cost the Caribbean country $4.2 billion between April 2017 and March 2018. This brings Cuba's total losses over 6 decades to $134.5 billion. On August 31st, the UN General Assembly will vote on a resolution that demands the end of the blockade.
Time for another short break. World News is next.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur. With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. South Sudan's opposition leader Riek Machar has refused to sign the latest draft of a peace deal with the government. The ceasefire and power sharing agreement was reported as being a breakthrough. The peace deal was meant to put an end to a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people. Opposition groups are now demanding more guarantees from the government. And the International Criminal Court has asked judges to convict the former Congo military leader of war crimes. Bosco Ntaganda is accused of a range of war crimes from rape to sexual slavery. He allegedly committed some of these crimes over 15 years ago when he was serving in a militia group east of the country. Natanga has denied the charges. Now, if convicted, he faces 18 counts of war crimes. And now it's time to bring you some of today's other stories from around the world.
To the International Criminal Court.
United Nations human rights experts say all parties involved in the Yemen war may be guilty of war crimes. In a report, they implicate the Yemeni government forces, the Saudi-led coalition, and the Houthi fighters, all of whom they say played a part in civilian casualties. Experts will present their report to the UN Human Rights Council next month.
We support all efforts, including of the Special Envoy of the Secretary-General for Yemen, to cease hostilities, reach a sustainable and inclusive peace, and ensure accountability for serious violations and crimes. This conflict has to end. Civilians have suffered enough.
The opposition presidential candidate in the Maldives doesn't expect next month's election to be free and fair. Mohamed Soleh of the Maldivian Democratic Party is challenging incumbent President Abdullah Yameen, who imposed a state of emergency earlier this year. Speaking to residents, Soleh said that he is aware that President Yameen will try to rig the elections, but trusted the people to make the right decision. The election is due to take place on the 23rd of September. China is planning to scrap its controversial two-child policy, according to a state-run newspaper. According to the paper, a draft code is underway. The code is set to end a policy that has been enforced through fines and forced abortions. The Standing Committee of the National People's Congress is discussing the draft, which is set to be completed by 2020.
The Notting Hill Carnival has once again transformed the streets of London into a display of colour and the place to party. Each year, the festival attracts thousands of partygoers who are treated to drum bands and dancers from the West Indian community. Starting in 1966, it's become an iconic event in the British calendar. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talis Your English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you for watching.